From Argus Media, this is Driving Discussions, a podcast series where we focus on the forces that affect North American road fuels. Greetings and salutations once again. I'm Argus's U.S. Gulf Coast blend stocks reporter Jason Metko, and on this episode we're following up with our Rins reporter Matthew Cope, discussing the effects from the recent EPA announcement regarding finalized biofuel blending volumes for this year, as well as the next 2 years, in addition to the acronyms known as HOBO and BOHO, and how the market may play out over the course of the remainder of the year. Matthew, good to have you back on the presentation. I know a lot has happened in the last month. The last time we were together, we talked about RINs, what they were, what they mean for D3 markets. Where have we gone here in the last month or so?
First off, thanks, Jason. Glad to be back on the show after a quick turnaround from the last one. And yeah, the last episode, we were talking about RINs and how they were going to be this, extension to the RIN program that would give credits to EV producers based on biogas-based electricity. And we were kind of left of, hey, this is uncertain. We're waiting for the EPA volumes release coming here at the middle of June. And basically what I can report to you is that if you were waiting for a storybook ending on RINs, it's not going to happen.
Oh, shucks.
It was left out of that announcement when, EPA came in and said, here's the volumes for 23, 24, and 25. But they left the door open. Upon correspondence with the EPA, it appears that it was not the right time. That's just the nature of the beast. Based on that public comment period, they took a hard look at it and said, okay, we want to make sure we get this right. Now's not the time. But at some point, maybe a year from now, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, but at some point, they'll probably reshape that program, revisit it with a new spin on it. And we may hear about RINs again, but it's not going to happen on the timeline that we're thinking it might.
Okay, so getting back to this release for the fuels, tell us a little bit about where these volumes were set and any surprises that might have showed up.
There were definitely, I would say, a little bit of surprise there. So, they came out with the finalized biofuel blending volumes for 2023, 2024, 2025. Obviously, with the exclusion of RINs, we saw D3, back to a much lower number of what we thought. But the big surprise came with the total renewable fuel side, which most of that was from ethanol, to where they came out and said, okay, ethanol, we're going to dial it back. That decrease in 2024 and 2025 was mainly on the ethanol side, which obviously, as you can imagine, that shakes up RIN markets pretty much immediately. By, I think, noon of that day when everything was released, you had the trade groups, the industry reps, the lobbyists on behalf of the biofuel ethanol industry came out and said, hey, this is not where we expected it to be. We've put in a lot of investment, a lot of money, a lot of time for this, whether it's a part of the Inflation Reduction Act, they're investing in biofuels, they're building more plants, they're trying to get their capacity up. And it felt like, they were expecting the EPA to kind of support them and say, hey, let's boost these prices, let's help the corn farmers out, let's help the ethanol producers out. And it just fell a little bit short of what people were expecting. But at the same time, it was not nearly as much of a shock as what we saw 6 or 7 months ago, late November, early December, because when that happened, RIN prices fell pretty much dramatically, and it was very volatile thereafter that. Here, RIN prices fell over the course of that day, but within 24 hours, we were already back on an upswing. I want to say the low on E23, which is a D6 ethanol RIN, kicked the bottom at around $1.25. And then from there, we were already back up in the 130s pretty much a couple days later. And from there, everything has kind of gotten back on track. But following that, we had some more surprises.
He is Matthew Cope, our RINs reporter. This is Driving Discussions. Matthew, I've got some more word salad for you here. I've heard terms of HOBO and BOHO. Can you elaborate on what those are, how it relates to RINs markets, and what we're seeing there?
You got it. So this acronym, BOHO or HOBO, however you want to say it, what it is, it's a measure, matching bean oil and heating oil, which are, as we know, two very important kind of feedstocks to the biofuels industry and these markets. So BOHO, as I would say most people refer to it as BOHO. It serves as an indication of blend margin for biodiesel producers. So biomass-based diesel RIN credits and BOHO, when one rises, the other will rise as well. And usually that's because, hey, soybean oil, which is that bean oil, when the price goes up there, it's going to pull that D4 RIN in tandem. And what producers will use is they pay attention to these numbers really closely, because what they do is this will insulate their margins when you're dealing with that ultra low sulfur diesel on the conventional side or the soybean oil, to where they're having to pay attention to obviously both of them to make sure, their renewable diesel, biodiesel operations run smoothly. When one goes way out of whack, it can throw everything off. But if you're looking at that BOHO number, they want to make sure that they're not going to be completely screwed
Right.
if there's a huge jump in the market. And as we talked about last week, there was a pretty big shift to where BOHO jumped, soybean oil prices rose dramatically, and that came as a result of an acreage report from the EPA, to where the previous expectation was there was going to be 87 million acres of soybean crop land, and the report came out and it bumped it down to 83.5. And as you can imagine, you're in that market, you need your feedstock, you rely on this commodity, and from there it was, boom, all of a sudden there's fears of a shortage. So that is going to drive up soybean oil prices, which is going to drive up D4 RIN prices, which ended up driving up RVO. BOHO jumped 28 cents a gallon. It finished at 242.76 a gallon. And that is the highest I think we've seen since November of last year. So that was a pretty significant move. And from there, obviously, we're sitting around going, all right, well, what does this mean? Where we go from here? And that acreage report, is there going to be a further update on that? Is it going to be even lower forward? Are we on a downward trend overall? Or are we, maybe just have a blip and it's going to pull back up? Maybe that's weather related. Maybe that's, from something else. But that was the big story. And following that EPA volume release, which kind of drove RIN prices down, we had kind of leveled off, kind of weathered the storm. And then all of a sudden, here's another storm that, as we know, RINs are one of the most volatile things we cover here at Argus. And to have just one thing after another of, hey, here's a release that just stirs everything up to where you think that, everything is nice and simmered. All of a sudden, poof, here we go again.
Couple more minutes here with the man who can see the RINs market through the storms, Matthew Cope, our RINs reporter here on Driving Discussions. So we've had so much happen so fast in the last 30 days. We're talking here at the beginning of July. What are we looking for the next month, maybe 2 months? Anything that folks should really pay attention to here?
It's a great question because we don't have too much on the calendar that would shake up RIN markets. But as you know, like I just talked about, you never know when one of these things is just going to pop up and the whack-a-mole happens of, hey, here's something that's going to drive everything way up or way down. We know that this is a market driven a lot by policy, and whether or not we want to face the reality, we are approaching a year away from another major election, and whenever there are big presidential and congressional elections, and could have a regime change, we could not, but know that whenever those things do happen, RIN markets can feel it, and the speculation. The uncertainty is definitely very real, so it's still at least a year ahead. But, people in the market know that when the time comes, that's when things will change.
Well, I hope we're not waiting a year to talk to you again.
No, I hope not. There will be other things that pop up. EPA loves to get everything going every once in a while. We'll look back at, when there are more scheduled announcements, and, as your other favorite term, word salad, all these acronyms. I feel like I'm the man that comes on and talks about acronyms. SREs, we could have some news on there. HOBO, BOHO, we could have news on there. We're not sure, but all we can do is sit tight and watch the party.
Matthew, appreciate the time. Hope to have you back soon, my friend.
We sure will, Jason. Thanks for having me.
There he is, Matthew Cope, our RINs reporter here at Argus. And with that, we tidy up another edition of Driving Discussions, a production of Argus Media, a leading independent provider of energy and commodity pricing information. Friendly reminder to check out the previous chats in this series, and for more details on Argus's U.S. biofuels coverage, make sure you check out argusmedia.com/Americas-biofuels.